I'm going to show you some clicks and some keyboard shortcuts I like to use when I'm highlighting measures in Finale. You can use these highlighting tricks in the selection tool and the measure tool, the key signature tool, time signature tool, clef tool, or the repeat tool. I'm just going to stick to the selection tool for this video, and hopefully you'll pick up a few tricks to help you speed up your Finale work. In this example, I have a quartet set up and there are two systems on the page. And again, I am in the selection tool. So the first thing I just want to show you, if I want to select the entire piece, all I have to do is press Command A and it highlights the entire piece. Of course, you can find that under the Edit menu at the top. Select all, Command A, but it's a lot faster just to use that keyboard shortcut. If you want to highlight an entire staff, you can click to the left of the staff. Now this is for the entire piece. So if I click to the left of this first line, it's going to highlight the first line and the second line because it highlights the entire staff. With that staff highlighted, if I want to select the staff below it, I can press Shift plus the down arrow key, and then I can just click one at a time and add one staff at a time. I can do that in reverse too. Let's say I have the entire bottom staff selected. I can shift and click the up arrow key and highlight one staff at a time. You can also highlight a range of staves by shift clicking. Let's say I want to highlight the second line through the fourth line. I will click to the left of the second line, and then I can shift click to the left of the fourth line, and then it highlights any staves in between, any line in between. Let's talk about highlighting measures vertically. First of all, just to highlight one measure, click in the measure. And if you're in the selection tool, make sure to not click directly on a note, otherwise it'll highlight just the note. But if you want to highlight the measure, just click in the measure. If you want to highlight measures below that measure that I've selected, I can press Shift plus the down arrow key and highlight one at a time. Just keep adding. You can do that in reverse too. Let's say I have a measure in the fourth line selected. I can press Shift and the up arrow key, one at a time. I can also highlight a range of measures vertically, just as we did with the staves. Let's say if I wanted to highlight lines 1 through 3 in this second measure, I would click in the first line and then shift click in a measure in the third line. I can also highlight a measure stack, an entire stack, by double clicking in any measure of the stack. If I wanted to highlight the fourth measure of this first system, I could double click in the first line, or I could double click somewhere else, let's say in the third line. Double click here, and it highlights the entire stack. You can also highlight partial measures by clicking and dragging. Let's say in this third measure of the second line, I wanted to highlight maybe the first 3 beats. I can just click and drag while I'm in the selection tool. I can also do the same with a stack of measure. Let's say I wanted to highlight that same number of beats 1 through 3 of lines 1 and 2. Just click and drag to do that. You can also add partial measures below one at a time by pressing the Shift and the down arrow key. So let's say I have these 4/8 notes highlighted here, and I want to highlight the other staves below it. I just press Shift and down arrow, and we can select them that way. You can do that in reverse. Let me highlight the same notes in the bottom staff. Now I can do Shift and the up arrow key and highlight the measures above just for those 3 beats. Now let's talk about highlighting measures horizontally. You can highlight a range of measures in one line with shift click. Let's say I wanted to highlight measures 1 through 3 of this first staff. I could click in the first staff in the first measure, and then in the third measure just shift click. You can do that with multiple staves also. Let's say I have lines 1 through 3, and I want to highlight all that through the third measure. Now I can just shift click in the third measure, and it highlights all of those. You can also highlight a measure and add note by note to the right with the Shift plus the right arrow key. So let's say I have the second line first measure highlighted. If I press Shift and the right arrow, highlights the next note, then the next eighth note, the next eighth note, so it just adds one element at a time as I keep on clicking the right arrow key. I could reverse that also. Let me click in the fourth measure of this line. Now I'm going to Shift and click the left arrow key, and again we're adding one note at a time. You can do that with a stack of measures too. Let's say I highlight this entire stack of measures in the fourth line. Press Shift left arrow key, and we're adding one note at a time, and you can do that moving to the right also. Shift right arrow key. If you want to add a measure by measure instead of note by note, you can press Option Shift. So let's say I've got the first measure here highlighted. I press Option Shift and then right arrow key. So it gets the next measure, next measure, next measure. I could do that all the way to the end if I wanted. And you could do that in reverse with Option Shift plus the left arrow key. Now it's going to highlight measure by measure instead of note by note as I click to the left. You can do all that with a stack of measures as well. So I've got this first measure stack highlighted, Option Shift, and click to the right. We have the next measure selected, next measure, and you can do the same thing with Option Shift plus the left arrow key. So Option Shift left arrow, the entire measure, the entire measure. If I missed a highlighting trick, let me know in the comments below. I've been using Finale as a professional music engraver for about 25 years, but there's always more than one way to do anything in Finale, and it seems like I'm always learning something new. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time with more Finale tips.